They thought she was just another quiet soldier assigned to grunt work, the kind who kept her head down, followed orders, and stayed invisible in a place where only loud confidence earned respect. But what no one at Forward Operating Base Kestrel knew, what no one even thought to question, was that the same young woman they ignored had already made a shot so impossible it would later shake the entire command structure to its core. A shot measured not in meters alone, but in disbelief, precision, and silence. The kind of shot that doesn't just hit a target, but rewrites what people think is humanly possible. And the strange part was, when the moment came, she wouldn't brag about it, wouldn't even explain it unless asked directly, because for her it wasn't extraordinary. It was simply what needed to be done. But that truth, like her, remained hidden for now, buried beneath dust, routine, and the casual dismissal of those around her. And so the morning began like any other, with the low hum of generators, the distant thud of rotor blades slicing through dry air, and a pale orange sun stretching across the rugged terrain as soldiers moved through their routines with mechanical familiarity, checking weapons, loading gear, exchanging half-hearted jokes meant more to pass time than to connect. And there, near the far end of the perimeter where the heavy weapons were stationed, she knelt beside a mounted .50 caliber machine gun, her movements calm, deliberate, almost too precise. For someone of her rank, threading the ammunition belt with steady hands, adjusting the feed tray, pausing just long enough to feel the subtle resistance in the mechanism before correcting it without hesitation, as if she could sense flaws others couldn't even see. Her name was barely spoken on base. When it was usually followed by a shrug or a smirk. The kids on ammo duty again, someone muttered as they passed, not even bothering to lower their voice. Another added, just make sure she doesn't jam the damn thing. And a few quiet laughs followed, the kind that carried no real malice but also no respect, the kind that reduced a person to background noise. And she didn't respond, didn't look up, didn't show the slightest reaction, because she had heard worse before and learned long ago that correcting people who had already made up their minds was a waste of energy. Instead, she continued her work, checking alignment against the horizon, adjusting elevation by a fraction so small it would have gone unnoticed by most, her eyes scanning the distant ridgelines not casually, not aimlessly, but with a focus that suggested calculation, like she was measuring distances no one else was thinking about. And if anyone had stopped to really watch her, to really pay attention, they might have noticed that she wasn't just preparing the weapon for standard operation, she was tuning it, refining it, as if anticipating conditions far beyond what the day required. But no one stopped. No one looked long enough, because to them she was just part of the scenery, another junior soldier filling a role that didn't require thought. And then the sound of engines grew louder, cutting through the routine like a signal that something mattered more than the ordinary. A convoy approached, kicking up a trail of dust that rolled across the base in thick waves. Conversations paused, postures straightened, and attention shifted instantly, because this wasn't a routine arrival, this was command. And when the lead vehicle came to a stop, the door opened with a sharp, deliberate motion, and General Arjun Rathore stepped out, his presence carrying a weight that didn't need announcement, a man known for precision, for discipline, for seeing what others missed. Though even he, in that moment, didn't yet see her, he moved forward with purpose, officers falling into step behind him, reports already being prepared in their heads. And as he walked past the heavy weapons station, his gaze swept the area quickly, efficiently, cataloging what he needed to know, until something small, almost imperceptible, made him slow, not stop, just slow, because out of the corner of his eye he had caught the way the young soldier adjusted the weapon, not the action itself, but the manner of it, controlled, exact, unhesitating, and for a fraction of a second, instinct told him that movement didn't match the person he assumed it belonged to. So he turned slightly, just enough to look, really look, and there she was, still kneeling, still working, unaware or unconcerned with the attention, her focus entirely on the mechanism in front of her. He watched as she corrected the feed angle by a hair, then tested the rotation with a touch so light it seemed almost unnecessary. Except it wasn't. It was intentional, practiced, and the general's brow tightened just slightly. "Who trained you on that?" he asked, his voice cutting cleanly through the air. The nearby soldiers stiffened, some glancing at each other, unsure if the question was directed at them. But she answered without hesitation, without looking up, "I train myself, sir." A brief silence followed. Then a quiet chuckle from one of the soldiers standing off to the side, quickly echoed by another, the kind of reaction that dismissed the answer before considering it, because self-training at that level wasn't something they took seriously, not from someone like her. But the general didn't laugh, didn't respond immediately. He simply watched her for one more second, as if weighing something he couldn't yet define, then gave a short nod and continued walking. The moment passing as quickly as it had come. Conversations resumed, the tension dissolved, and within minutes it was as if nothing had happened at all. Just another inspection, just another overlooked exchange. And yet, as the day carried on and the sun climbed higher, casting sharper shadows across the base, there remained a subtle shift, not in the others, but in him, a quiet question forming, persistent, unresolved, because in a place where most actions were predictable, hers had not been, and while everyone else returned to their routines, laughing, talking, moving forward without a second thought, the general carried that small moment with him, not knowing yet that it was the beginning of something far larger, something that would soon force everyone there to reconsider exactly who they had been ignoring and why. The report didn't stand out at first, just another sheet among dozens moving across the command table that afternoon, filled with coordinates, wind logs, and confirmations that blurred together into routine, until one number quietly disrupted everything, confirmed kill distance, 5,754 meters, and for a moment, no one reacted, because it didn't register as real. It sat there like an error waiting to be corrected, until one officer finally leaned in, frowning. "That's not possible," he said. Under his breath, another shook his head, already dismissing it. "It's a typo, has to be." But the deeper they looked, the worse it got. Every detail lined up: wind speed, elevation, trajectory corrections, observer confirmations, all precise, all verified, leaving no obvious mistake to point at. And at the head of the table, General Arjun Rathore remained silent, reading the report slowly, the way he did when something didn't fit, because in his experience, the most dangerous assumptions were the ones made too quickly. He flipped the page, scanning the shooter identification, not a name, just a restricted classification, temporary assignment, and something about that triggered a memory, faint but persistent. The young soldier from earlier, the one adjusting the .50 caliber machine gun with unusual precision. The same faint initials he had noticed on a nearby log now appearing again on the corner of this report, almost hidden, almost ignored, except now they mattered. "Bring her in," he said calmly, and the room hesitated for just a second, because some already suspected who he meant, and it didn't match what they believed. But minutes later she stood in front of them, the same quiet posture, the same unreadable expression, as if she had been called for something ordinary, not realizing that every eye in the room was now fixed on her. The general slid the report toward her, his voice steady. "Did you take this shot?" he asked. No disbelief, just clarity. She glanced at the page once, then nodded. "Yes, sir." The simplicity of the answer unsettled the room more than any explanation could have. One officer let out a quiet scoff, unable to hold back. At that distance, even trained snipers would miss. You don't just make that kind of shot. She didn't react to the tone, didn't defend herself the way they expected. She just spoke calmly. "You don't aim through the wind," she said, and the room fell silent again, because that wasn't guesswork, that was understanding. The general leaned forward slightly, interested now. "Then what do you do?" he asked, and for the first time, she looked up, meeting his eyes directly. "You wait for it to fail," she replied, a brief pause following. "Wind at that height isn't steady. It builds, then drops suddenly. Most people try to fight it. I waited until it broke." One of the officers shifted uncomfortably, because the explanation made sense in a way they didn't like. "And you timed that?" he pressed. She shook her head. "Slightly. I watched it long enough to recognize it," she said. And that difference, small as it sounded, changed the entire room. Because luck could explain one shot, but recognition meant skill, and skill meant this wasn't an accident. The general studied her for a moment longer, weighing her words against the report in front of him, and finding no contradiction, only confirmation. "What weapon?" he asked finally. "Modified heavy platform, sir." She answered without hesitation. Another glance. passed between the officers, because even that didn't fully explain what they were hearing, but explanations were no longer enough. Proof was needed, and the general knew it. He closed the file slowly, making his decision. "Tomorrow morning," he said, his voice even, controlled. "You'll demonstrate." A quiet murmur moved through the room, some skeptical, some curious, most expecting her to fail under scrutiny, because reading a report was one thing. Seeing it happen was another. She didn't question. The order didn't react at all, just nodded once. "Yes, sir." As if it was nothing more than another task, and as she turned to leave, the room remained still, the weight of the moment settling in, because by the next day, they would either confirm something extraordinary or expose it, and either way, the quiet soldier they had ignored was no longer invisible. By the next morning, the entire base had heard, and what began as quiet skepticism had turned into open curiosity. Soldiers gathering along the ridge line where the demonstration was set, some whispering, some already certain they were about to watch a mistake unravel, because numbers on paper were easy to doubt, but reality had a way of settling arguments quickly. The target had been placed far beyond standard engagement distance, far enough that even the spotters adjusted their scopes twice, just to confirm it was visible, and when she stepped forward, there was no tension in her movements, no sign that she felt the weight of dozens of eyes watching. She simply approached the weapon, checked it once, then again, small adjustments made with the same quiet precision they had all ignored the day before. The wind moved steadily across the ridge, stronger than expected, unpredictable, exactly the kind of condition that justified their doubt. One officer muttered, "This is where it falls apart." But the general said nothing, his focus locked entirely on her, because now he wasn't looking for failure. He was looking for truth. She settled into position, not rushing, not hesitating, just waiting. Seconds passed, then more, long enough for the murmurs to start again, until finally, she fired. The sound cracked through the air, sharp and final, and then there was nothing, just silence stretching longer than anyone expected. 1 second, 2, 3, enough time for doubt to creep back in, until the distant impact finally echoed back, confirmed by the spotter a heartbeat later. "Hit," he said, his voice lower than before, almost uncertain, dead center. And just like that, the noise on the ridge disappeared, replaced by a stillness that carried more weight than any reaction could. She didn't celebrate, didn't even look up. She simply stepped back from the weapon as if the outcome had never been in question. And that was what unsettled them most, not the shot itself, but the fact that to her, it wasn't remarkable. The general removed his cap slowly, not out of formality, but out of respect, something rare, something earned. "You weren't trained here," he said quietly, and she shook her head. "No, sir." A brief pause followed before he asked the only question left. "Where then?" She held his gaze for a moment, then answered simply, "Somewhere that didn't keep records." And that was enough, because it explained everything and nothing at the same time. The silence lingered as the realization settled in, that the soldier they had dismissed, overlooked, reduced to background noise, had already done what most of them wouldn't even attempt. And the general turned slightly toward the others, his voice calm but firm. "Remember this," he said. "Skill doesn't announce itself." His eyes moved back to her. "And it doesn't ask to be seen." No one spoke after that, because there was nothing left to argue, no disbelief left to hold on to, only understanding, and from that moment on, no one called her kid. No one laughed when she passed. They didn't say much at all. They simply made space, because some reputations aren't built through words or rank. They're built in moments like this, quiet, undeniable, and impossible to ignore.